Thank you, Jens, for this opportunity to speak, to have a short talk. I start my timer just to not go beyond our limit. Hi, my name is Miroslaw Opoka, and in this short talk, I'd like to talk about single entry and single exit rule. Basically, for the software development, as we all know, we have different rules. We apply on our discipline of software development just to make our software more reliable, to keep it maintainable, and most of all readable. It is especially important when several people are working on the same code base. So one of those rules is single entry, single exit, and I had when I stumbled upon this, I got to have a closer look at the rule. So what is the rule all about? So this is the rule. More or less, it says that subprograms should have only a single entry and single exit point. So single entry and single exit only. And it is written like this in this safety norm, IEC. You can see it on screen in the part 7 and given section, which gives us some techniques and measures that we should apply to our software to make it safe and good for safety-related systems. As a reference, it quotes a structured design book, which is pretty old, 79, which in turn says that it is it's really was highly influenced by the notes on structured programming wrote by Mr. Dijkstra in 1970. So the idea back then was to simplify the flow of the program because back then the typical programming languages used were assembler, Fortran, COBOL. There was no C, there was no C++. And in those languages, especially in assembler and Fortran, it is easy to jump all over the place. In assembler, it is clear. But even in Fortran, we can jump into a subroutine procedure and start it not from the beginning, but a little bit later. It is possible. Of course, we can jump out of it also earlier. So that led to the code, which was kind of spaghetti. And sooner or later, people realized we have to do something about it because the code becomes unmaintainable and hard to understand. So that was the proposal to solve this problem or to address this problem, and Mr. Dijkstra wrote quite a lot about this, not only about the structure of programming but also about the go-to in general. So he said that it's not a good idea to use. Okay, where is the rules used? So as mentioned already, these IEC standards say that explicitly. Misra took this standard from EIC, and it says with a little bit different form. As you can see, it is function should have a single point of exit at the end. It is clear because they adapted it to the modern languages, so in 90s. So when we start a procedure, we start always from the beginning. So we are not jumping to the middle of it, but we can still jump out of it quite easily. In Google style guide, it is not mentioned at all, so it is left to the user. AUTOSAR explicitly say that we are permitted to jump out at different places. And ISO C++ coding guidance go one step forward, saying that we should not insist on applying this rule. So they are just a bit more on liberal side. And so just briefly, what the rule, how the rule looks in a practice. On the left side, on the right side, we see the same code, but on the left side, we have this rule implemented. On the right side, not. On the left side, in both sides, there are just 3 conditions to do something, and at 3 different situations when return different error code when conditions are not met. So it looks like this, more or less. and but we have one single exit point. On the other side, we can just check the conditions at the beginning and exit early, returning the appropriate error code, and only when all conditions are met, we are doing our stuff. So this is more or less the difference in a style. And yeah, so for my personal point of view, I prefer the second version because it gives me a bit more easier to understand code. And if we compare different the advantages and disadvantages of this style, I sorted them out into three categories: readability, resources, and debugging. Readability I made in bold because I think this is something which is for me personally extremely important. So on the single exit, single entry and exit rule, as we could see before, it pretty quickly gets hard to understand when we have a lot of nesting inside. Then it gets a bit problematic. On the other side, when we are a bit relaxed about this and we can exit early, then it makes our code easier to read, and which was not visible, but it's worth mentioning. It frees our mental resources when we know that at some point in the code, from this moment on, we can focus on our task because the preconditions are already solved or taken care of. So that's one thing. On the other side, it's more. Sometimes people are saying this more about resources. So they are in using the rule. We can ensure that resources are freed at one place, and the rule is not that on the other side it could have been a problem before, but using C++ and resource allocation is initialization, we can pretty nice get around it. So even if we exit early and we allocated something, we may make the code so that we don't lose resources. I've heard also opinion that then debugging is easy regarding single entry, single exit, because we can set there's one breakpoint somewhere at the end, and we know what is, when we stop there, we know what was before, when we can inspect the previous variable. In on the other side, we have to take several breakpoints. So that's the comparison. All the links to standards I mentioned before, I collected in one place, and here are the links if later we are going to share these slides. And also I collected some links regarding some discussions there was on Stack Overflow regarding this, which were quite interesting to read. So finally, what was the conclusion? Well, I would say so. It was just a quick overview in a few minutes, and in my personal opinion to that is that, as I mentioned before, readability is the most important value, at least for me. So if using the rule makes the code clearer and more understandable and readable, I would definitely go for it. If the other thing, if it is not the case, so if applying the rule, like in the example, make the code harder to understand, I will not use it. So it's up to you to apply it or not. I would say if it makes sense, do it. If not, don't. So that is it, and thank you for attention.
Thank you, Miroslav.